So if you go to the first slide, South Asia is South Asia is a region that comprises nearly 1/4 of the world's people, and 2/3 of these people live in rural areas. 2 out of 5 people in South Asia rely on agriculture and related activities for their livelihoods. And this is a number that is not adequately matched by the GDP of the sector, which only stands at 18%. So meanwhile, about 80% of the region's food is produced by small-scale producers, who at the same time, very paradoxically, are amongst the most vulnerable to food insecurity. This is particularly relevant as the emerging food crisis as a result of the conflict in Ukraine has already started affecting the food systems across the world, just as we are recovering from the effects of the pandemic that my previous speaker talked about. If you go to the next slide, very quickly about IFAD. Over the last 4 decades, IFAD has financed about 152 projects with over $4 billion in sovereign loans and grants in the region. And these $4 billion have leveraged close to twice as much in co-financing, so close to $12 billion. And this has impacted about 23 million households. Now, if we go to the next slides, I would like to quickly talk about the main challenges that we see in agriculture. Do you mind shifting the slide? Thank you so much. So first and foremost, lack of access to markets and finance. And it's very nice at these meetings that I hear so much about nutrition, about climate, about what we should do. And then sometimes it seems that we are forgetting that in the end, it's free consumers that are dictating what farmers should grow, and that farmers are competing for consumers' preferences. So, but with the farmers that we are dealing with, smallholders, it's very often lack of access to markets due to limited capacities of very small enterprises, also lack of capital and knowledge. And very often we're dealing with very remote producers that also very often don't have the productivity to really compete in agricultural value chains. And finally, there's a perceived uncertainty and very often very high transaction costs for financial institutions to operate in the remote areas. Then you see the point of insufficient investment. And very often we are thinking of public investments by agencies like IFAD. But what I think is so important, no, stay with the previous one, please. What is so important is that I mean really also the private sector investment. So and we really need the private sector to invest and the farmers to invest, so that we can really bring about prosperity at scale. It cannot just be left to governments. And I think part of it is, of course, what I already mentioned: the very low productivity, the limited competitiveness, and even limited competition to some extent. So I think it is very, very important that we look much more at what the public sector should finance, rather than how much financing goes into the sector. I think it is really, really important what we invest and how we invest, so that we have enabling investments. I'll come to this more. Then climate threats, of course. I'm still in the previous slides, by the way. So if you go, there's a chance to go back, maybe that's better. Thank you so much. Climate threats, and of course we have this increasing variability of weather with very often weather shocks, and obviously with an increasing value that we globally produce, these shocks also have a much bigger impact. So there's more at stake, and obviously resilience to shocks is key. Lastly, the voice and visibility. Now, very often I hear like, let's help farmers build groups and so on, so that they can negotiate better prices. I think well, it works to some extent, but it's mainly about really advocacy, and it's about revisiting our concept that we have of poverty so that we can overcome dependencies and help farmers to grow in dignity. So now I'm coming to the next slide, please. So IFAD's investments in South Asia are strongly focused on climate resilient agriculture. Somebody mentioned on the previous session, I've seen a very big featuring agroecology. I'm happy to report that about 60% of IFAD's investments implement really agroecological practices at the farm, at the landscape, at the market, and at the policy levels. Agricultural practices, agroecological practices, are very often, built on really farmers' traditional knowledge and merge it with scientific innovations. And
so, Ulaç, your PPT is not moving so far, I know.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'm still there.
I'm still not moving.
It's good. I want people to listen to me rather than looking at the slides. So that's fine. And I hope you can listen to me. I know you must be all very exhausted at this hour. Well, the good thing about agroecological practice, as I said, that they combine farmers' traditional knowledge with scientific innovations, and that they integrate ecological, economic, and social development. I want to really emphasize, in this, we can really emphasize the importance of small-scale producers, and particularly women in food systems, to connect them to more directly to consumers and deliver sustainably produced, healthy, and nutritious food. So IFAD is also giving climate resilient agriculture a boost with its adaptation of smallholder adaptation of smallholder agriculture program, the ASAP Plus, which mobilizes another $500 million that we are merging with our loans and grants so that we can climate proof and social proof our investments and make sure that they have these very important mainstreaming. Now, coming to the next one, the catalytic investments. And here, this is so important that the public sector finances the right thing. I've already talked about. And the public sector should mainly focus on public goods because these provide policy and regulatory framework that provides a level playing field and transparent markets in which the private investments can be leveraged and in which private actors can compete. So we have to really invest in public goods. And one good example that IFAD has developed a concept is what we call the 4 Ps: the public, private, and producer partnership. So we're bringing the producer into the equation, and we work with them in close partnership. What is so important is that we think of every investment as catalytic. It has to leverage private investment. Otherwise, we'll never get to the scale and to the impact that we need to achieve the SDGs. Next one. Again, you're too fast with the slideshow. I'm still at the previous slide. I'm sorry, maybe I'm talking too much, but this is really the core messages that I would like to pass. The next one is about empowerment, and here we really need to rethink our discourse and our actions. That we take it from a poverty lens to really a prosperity mindset. We have to really work with the realities of helping producers to become more competitive. It's not about protecting them. It's about making them more competitive and really focusing on their productivity rather than supplying the typical supply-driven sector-focused approaches. So again, it is not the size of investment, of public investment that matters, but first and foremost about how we invest and what we invest in. Lastly, about strengthening rural and community institutions. Also here, I would suggest some rethinking, and we have to embrace competition as it is a reality. You know, every farmer, every smallholder farmer that are our clients is competing with every other farmer in the world, whether we like it or not. So if we want to empower small-scale producers, then we have to help them embrace competition so that they can really prosper and that they can prosper in dignity. Competing in a global market, of course, means they need to have the size and capacity that allows family farms to compete in these global markets. And therefore, everything that IFAD is doing revolves around helping rural people to build robust institutions. Institutions and their aggregate size allow family farmers to get credit and to do business and to link up with other partners in their value chains and grow together with them. So they are really key, not only to do business, but also to be really in the driving seat of their own development. So let's go to the next slide. And now I'll try to speed up, although the slides become more crowded. So here is a slide that presents the IFAD mainstreaming commitments. IFAD's business model really depends on the one hand, we want to increase outreach, we want to reach more people with the investments we make, but at the same time, we also want to deepen our impact. And this is how we are going to do it. First of all, what is missing in this slide is that 100% of our investments have to be gender sensitive. Then 60% youth sensitive, 60% nutrition sensitive, 40% with a real explicit climate focus, although we are far above this target already in South Asia. And 35% have to be fully gender transformative. This is basically taking the gender sensitivity to the next level, where we really want to see a complete significant change and focus on changing the status of women and economic empowerment. Next slide, please. So here, very quickly, IFAD's business model. Again, I've already talked about the expanding impact and about deepening impact through the mainstreaming objectives. And of course, this is coming with a number of institutional reforms, internal reforms that you see there on the left side in the slide, and also a transformational financial framework that IFAD has been working on, so that we really can have transformational country programs. And let's look at the next slide just to close it off. Next slide, please. Okay, thank you so much. Oh, the previous one. So this is just to illustrate a little bit what I've been talking about. So there's been a lot of recent reforms and innovations. For those who knew IFAD for a long time, be prepared. There's a lot of changes have been coming along and will be coming along in the next 3 years under IFAD 12. So on the one hand, we have now a very comprehensive financial framework. We are providing our core resources mainly to the poorest countries, really to the lower income countries and lower middle income countries, and those countries who can and who are interested to borrow more can get access to our borrowed resources. So we are also borrowing in the market now so that we can increase our program and continue serving poverty pockets in the upper middle income countries and those clients that don't necessarily depend on highly concessional financing. But IFAD is also attempting to become an assembler of development finance. And who would be better positioned than a UN agency that is owned and governed by all the countries of the world? So we are mobilizing international co-financing. Obviously, at the country level, we are mobilizing co-financing from governments, and of course, all this we are not mobilizing co-financing from the private sector, but we want to leverage investment by the private sector. This is really key because this has to really bring it to the next level and to the next dimension, actually, of investment. We have developed a number of, you see a lot of abbreviations here, a number of new instruments. One that I'm really excited about is the last one, the NSO, so non-sovereign operations, where we can engage from IFAD 12 directly with the private sector. So we can also help socially sustainable enterprises to engage really with our target group and invest better in helping farmers to get links to the markets and so on. So now I'm coming to really the last one. I'm not sure how I am standing this time. I hope I'm not boring you too much, but very quickly, IFAD's strengthened or transformational country programs. That's what we have in mind. On the one hand, on the lower side, you see the investments. So IFAD's loans and grants, the co-financing, the private investment, and then the ASAP, the adaptation of smallholder agriculture program that I talked about, that is giving this grant financed layer to climate proof and socially proof our investments and really push the mainstreaming topics. But then there's also the combination with policy and knowledge, and that's so important also to bring our investments to scale through policy engagement, through partnerships, and through obviously working with knowledge partners and partly this finance to grants. So all this, of course, to have a much stronger impact and achieve the SDGs. And with this, I would like to leave it. Thank you so much for listening, and I'm happy to answer any questions if we have time. Thank you.